of the United Nations for the Prevention of Genocide, Mr. Chaloka Biani, will also speak. That will be a video contribution.
It is with a profound sense of urgency and responsibility that we address this special session of the Human Rights Council on the crisis in and around Al-Fashir, Sudan. I have the duty to deliver this joint statement on behalf of Chaloka Biani, the UN Special Advisor for the Prevention of Genocide, and myself in my capacity as African Union Special Envoy for the Prevention of Genocide and other mass atrocities. Today, the African Union and the United Nations stand united, bound by a long-standing partnership and a solemn duty to protect vulnerable populations from the scourge of violence and impunity. This is a humanitarian and human rights catastrophe unfolding before our eyes. The situation in Sudan, particularly in Al-Fashir and the wider Darfur and Kordofan regions, has reached a critical and tragic juncture. Since the outbreak of conflict between the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces in April 2023, the civilian population has endured unimaginable suffering. Over 14 million people have been forcibly displaced, more than 40,000 killed, and countless others subjected to summary executions, mass killings, abduction, torture, rape, and attacks on humanitarian workers. As the UN's independent international fact-finding mission for Sudan recently stated, amid the rising tide of hate speech and ethnically driven violence and reprisal, we fear the darkest chapters of this conflict have yet to unfold. Survivors from Zamzam camps south of Al-Fashir have recounted being placed in the siege-like conditions. As one investigator stated, you kill, no food, no water, you don't allow access to humanitarian aid, so what you do want is to kill population, so it's very clear. The effect of this is really the crime against humanity of extermination. The deliberate starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as seen in the besieged cities of Al-Fashir and Kadugli, is expressly forbidden under Article 54 of the Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Convention. The African Union Peace and Security Council unequivocally condemned these atrocities, demanded an immediate ceasefire, and called it for unrestricted humanitarian access. The Council stated, standing with the people of Al-Fashir who have suffered enough since May 2024 under siege by the paramilitary RSF, during which time they have been denied access to food and other social basic needs, which deeply offends and is against AU values and international human rights and international humanitarian law. And the UN Office on Genocide Prevention has warned the systematic targeting of non-Arab communities, Darfur, Zagawa, and Masalit in Darfur, by mass killings and sexual violence, including rape, by obstruction of humanitarian aid, thus creating conditions intending to cause death, and by destruction of homes, farms, health facilities, water points, and other livelihoods, constitute strong indicators of deliberate intention to inflict conditions of life on these groups calculated to bring about their physical destruction in whole or in part. Indeed, the risk of genocide exists in Sudan. It is real and it is growing every single day. Yet, we must go beyond condemnation. We call upon the international community to redouble efforts to silence the gun in Sudan through inclusive dialogue and robust diplomatic engagement, in line with the African Union's Silencing the Guns initiative and the UN Charter. Demand immediate end to flow of weapons and fighters into Sudan that is further and very directly contributing to the systematic targeting of specific identity groups and to the already desperate situation in the country. Ensure justice and accountability for all violations, addressing impunity at every level. Protect civilians and uphold humanitarian law, prioritizing access to life-saving aid and the restoration of basic services. Support civil society and independent media whose voices are essential for transparency, early warning, and prevention. address the root causes of conflict, including discrimination, exclusion, and economic deprivation through inclusive governance and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, to end, we urge all member states, regional organizations, and international actors to act decisively and collectively. The world must not stand by as atrocities unfold. Silence and inaction are complicity. Let this session mark a turning point, a rallying call to our shared humanity and duty. The people of Sudan deserve nothing less than our unwavering commitment to peace, dignity, and justice. Thank you.
Merci pour cette déclaration.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Surya Deva, the chair of the Coordination Committee of Special Procedures. He will also be joining us by video.
President, Excellencies, and distinguished delegates, I have the honor of addressing the Human Rights Council today on behalf of the Coordination Committee of Special Procedures. We welcome the convening of this special session to address the human rights situation in and around Al-Fashir amid the ongoing conflict in the Sudan. Since the beginning of the conflict, the special procedures have raised the alarm through multiple communications and press releases, warning of widespread atrocities, massive displacement, and the catastrophic impact on civilians. For more than 2 years, the Sudanese people have endured the devastating consequences of a conflict marked by unrelenting violence, lawlessness, and disregard for international human rights and humanitarian law. We have received deeply disturbing reports of mass killings, summary executions, sexual violence, forced displacement, abductions, recruitment and use of children, destruction of vital infrastructure, and attacks on humanitarian workers. Mr. President, after 540 days of siege, the city of Al-Fashir fell to the Rapid Support Forces on 23rd October, making a new and horrific chapter in this tragedy. Reports indicate widespread atrocities during and after the takeover, including ethnically targeted killings of civilians and the use of gender-based violence against women and girls. Women have been raped in front of their relatives and detained for days in conditions amounting to torture. When the RSF entered shelters for displaced persons near Al-Fashir University, they reportedly selected women and girls at gunpoint, gang-raped at least 25 of them, and forced over 100 displaced families to flee amid gunfire. We are horrified by the scale and brutality of sexual violence being used as a deliberate strategy of domination and humiliation aimed at destroying communities. Mr. President, we are also deeply concerned by the reports of ethnically motivated summary executions of civilians in Al-Fashir and by the confirmation of famine in Al-Fashir and Kadugali, which will worsen the already catastrophic humanitarian situation. Sudan is now the epicenter of the largest displacement of crisis in the world, with more than 12 million people forced from their homes, including 8.6 million internally displaced persons and over 3 million refugees in neighboring countries. Camps for displaced people have been repeatedly attacked, resulting in the killing of hundreds of civilians. Internally displaced persons are now living in conditions that defy human dignity, often without shelter, health care, or education. This intensifying violence has far-reaching consequences beyond the Sudanese border. It fuels instability across the region and undermines the prospect for peace, sustainable development, and respect for human rights. Mr. President, the Coordination Committee joins the High Commissioner, the designated expert, and the fact-finding mission on Sudan in condemning all violations and abuses committed by the parties to the conflict. We also echo the call in the recent press release issued by a group of mandate holders for an immediate cessation of hostilities, the protection of civilians, and unimpeded humanitarian access. We urge the international community to use all means available to end the bloodshed, ensure the protection of civilians, establish the whereabouts of those disappeared, and hold accountable those responsible for these crimes. Silence or inaction in the face of such atrocities would be an abdication of the duty we all share to uphold the rule of law and prevent further suffering. We also urge the international community to ensure that warring parties respect the laws of the war and safeguard in particular the rights of civilians. No effort must be spared to ensure humanitarian access. Mr. President, the Coordination Committee and the broader system of special procedures stand ready to assist the Council, the High Commissioner, and all relevant actors in monitoring and responding to the human rights implication of this crisis. At this critical juncture, we must reaffirm the protection of human rights and respect for international law as well as international humanitarian law as the foundation of lasting peace. The Sudanese people deserve no less. I thank you.
Merci pour cette...
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Madam Mona Rishwami, a member of the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission for the Sudan. Madam, you have the floor.
Mr. President, High Commissioner, Excellencies, colleagues, much of Al-Fashir now is a crime scene. Since it fell into the hands of the Rapid Response Forces, our fact-finding mission has interviewed witnesses and collected evidence of unspeakable atrocities, deliberate killings, torture, rape, abduction for ransom, arbitrary detention, and enforced disappearances, all at a mass scale. A comprehensive investigation is required to establish the full picture, but what we already know is devastating. RSF turned Al-Fashir University into a killing ground after thousands of exhausted and starving civilians sought shelter there. Those fleeing the Saudi hospital reported summary executions of medical staff and civilians. Survivors described bodies piling in the streets and in trenches dug in and around the city. Their accounts are corroborated by verified digital evidence, reinforcing the scale and gravity of these crimes. For 18 months, Al-Fashir has been under siege, its population bombarded and cut off from food, water, medicine, and humanitarian relief. Despite repeated warnings of war crimes and crimes against humanity, the worst-case scenario has now materialized. Thousands of civilians remain missing, and only a few thousand have reached safety. We do not yet know whether they are too weak to leave or prevented from leaving, or whether they met an even worse fate. Some civilians who managed to escape told us they walked up to 60 kilometers without food or water to reach Tawila. At RSF checkpoints, women and men were subjected to invasive body searches, forced nudity, and interrogation about their ethnic and perceived affiliations. Verified videos show hundreds of men encircled by RSF fighters, beaten, forced to chant degrading slogans, and accused of supporting the rivals groups. Some verified videos show point-blank executions after the victim's ethnicity or affiliation with SAF or allied forces were suspected. Information gathered indicates that hundreds of women and girls were raped and gang-raped along escape routes, including in public, without fear of precautions or accountability. In one video, a female RSF fighter is seen laughing and urging her fellow fighters to rape women. The ethnic, political, and gender patterns are stark. Men from specific ethnic groups are executed. Women and children dominate those who are raped, abducted, and displaced. These crimes are not hidden. They are filmed, circulated, and even glorified. They mirror what we previously investigated in other parts of Darfur and elsewhere, now perhaps on a larger and more brutal scale. We are currently investigating similar atrocities in Kordofan, where civilians are encircled, aid is blocked, and starvation is beginning to emerge, risking another Al-Fashir. The horrors unfolding are the direct result of decades of impunity. They can and must now be stopped. Those who back, finance, and arm this machinery of brutality have the power and the duty to halt it. States with influence bear particular responsibility. The individuals and entities behind these crimes must face justice. 2 weeks ago, we presented our findings to the UN General Assembly and engaged with member states, including on Al-Fashir. We were encouraged by the recognition that independent investigations create the factual foundation for action, connecting victims' suffering with broader mechanisms for peace and justice. The Sudanese people have endured unimaginable suffering in this ongoing conflict. What they now need, and what international law demands, is an end to the bloodshed, immediate protection, and a credible path to justice. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Madam Niemet Ahmedi, the President of Darfur's Women Action Group, and this is a video message as well.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. As I speak to you, I am horrified, dismayed, and heartbroken to bring to you the plight of our people in Al-Fashir today. In the last week of October, the Rapid Support Forces have taken control of Al-Fashir, where Al-Fashir witnessed the worst massacre that brought unspeakable suffering to the men, women, and children of Darfur, who have suffered long before this attack has taken place. We have seen systematically the Rapid Support Forces killing people, following people as they flee, setting people in rows and shooting at them in masses. We have seen children have been hung into trees with the Rapid Support Forces militia cheering up and celebrating, using degrading words, while these children, teenage, who have been hung, screaming, crying, and begging for mercy for their life. People who have fled for their life have been killed. Women have been shot at and killed, leaving their children to wander around. Innocent children have been murdered precisely by the Rapid Support Forces. Credible sources confirm that uncountable number of women and girls have been raped. The Rapid Support Forces went into search house after house, building after building for those who have hid for their life, killing the men, torturing them, and raping women and girls. In an attack in a hospital, the Rapid Support Forces militia marched into this hospital, whereby 450 innocent patients were murdered, along with the medical staff and patient companions. Many more have been trapped and prevented from fleeing. I have never seen perpetrators that so emboldened, so brutal, so cruel, that they kill the people and record themselves and broadcast it across the internet while cheering in celebration, bragging about it, saying now that we have taken Al-Fashir, we are going to change the name of Darfur into the land of Al-Genocide, which is a prominent name for renegade Arab who have been brutalizing our people. This has echoed the broadcast that we have seen in Al-Geneva during the night of the mass exodus and the large-scale massacre that was witnessed in the eve of the killing of the governor of West Darfur. They prevent medical supply and humanitarian aid to be delivered into Al-Fashir or the surrounding area, including Abu Shouk and Zamzam camp. We further have seen the violation of international law and the systemic nature of uprooting the people of Darfur from their land by dismantling the camp. In Al-Junaina, they attacking the camps in the Linji, and they attack the Abu Shouk camp until they empty the entire camp dwelt by 400,000 people. And then they attack Zamzam camp, where over 800,000 people have lived there, most of whom are the survivors of the 2003 Darfur genocide. And today we have seen that in Al-Fashir, they are intending to clear the land from its people. And we must not allow our leaders to condone or ignore genocide. Lack of accountability have emboldened the rapid support forces and their so-called leaders of the Tasis government that they created in exile. They are going around lobbying the international community, asking to be included in a negotiating table. Make no mistake, the rapid support forces cannot bring peace to Sudan. Those who murder civilians, kill children, rape women, killing patients in their hospital bed will never bring peace to Sudan, and they do not deserve to be a part of any peaceful settlement of Sudan. And I therefore urge this Council to uphold your obligation to the international law and hold these militias accountable. Our people in Al-Fashir, despite the horror, they continue to show us that hope is possible and that we must not lose hope. And today, I have hope. By addressing you, I hope that you take a note and take serious, effective action that can end the suffering, restore dignity, and restore our confidence in our international institution. Thank you.
Merci pour cette déclaration.
Thank you for that statement. As per our practice, we will begin by hearing from the delegations of the countries concerned. I give the floor to the Distinguished Representative of Sudan as country concerned. Excellency, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the beginning of the rebellion by the terrorist militia, we have been warning many times that the wrong description of the conflict based on equating a militia with such a record of criminality with the SAF, this wrong criteria in many statements and decisions is the main reason that turned this rebellion militia a militia that is ignoring international humanitarian law, international law of human rights and all other international instruments and perpetrating all these atrocities. Is it normal to see someone who thinks that such a terrorist militia, a criminal terrorist militia, to be a part of any human entity? Was the international community expecting all these atrocities so that they are now calling to help and salvage Al-Fashir? We were warning all over the UN fora in Geneva and in other places. We were calling for pressure on the rebel militia and the country that is sponsoring it by supporting it with military and strategic equipment. And I mean the UAE. Where were you when this militia was violating all international resolution, including Security Council Resolution 2736, which called for lifting the siege on Al-Fashir? They have stepped on this decision and they engage in a siege for more than 1 year. The international community has been unable to take anything against this rebel militia or the sponsoring country. The result was the atrocities and the genocides that you have been witnessing. Mr. Chair, what is happening in Sudan is an existential war that is targeting a whole community and to replace it with other communities. You have seen how killing in Al-Fashir is based on ethnicity and even on color and race. So how can you describe genocide if this is not a genocide? You have also followed how they have systematically targeted civilian infrastructures and civilians for 2.5 years, and they have also targeted the mosque of Al-Arga Mosque in Al-Fashir. They have also invaded the maternity hospital and killed 460 patients and medical staff in the hospital. If this is not terrorism, how can you define terrorism? This criminal militia has violated all criteria of definition of a terrorist entity. how long will the international community wait before classifying this entity as a terrorist entity? Thank you.
Merci pour cette...
Thank you for that statement. We'll now begin with a list of speakers. Let me remind you that speaking time is limited to 1 minute 30 seconds for all. List of speakers will close in 15 minutes. We'll begin with the list of speakers for member states of the Council. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom on behalf of a group of countries.
Thank you, Mr. President. This statement is on behalf of the core group of Sudan Core Group. Sudan is collapsing under a brutal, protracted war. Last month, the Council condemned the escalation of violence in and around Al-Fashir and called upon all parties to protect civilians. These calls have been ignored and defied. The atrocities reported after the fall of Al-Fashir to the rapid support forces are horrific. Summary executions, sexual violence, abductions. Over 89,000 civilians have fled the city, joining millions already displaced. This is not merely a human rights and humanitarian emergency. It is a threat to regional stability and a test of international resolve. The special session brings global attention to the horrors unfolding in Al-Fashir. As the support for holding this session shows, staying silent is not an option. We urge this Council to support a strong resolution that condemns the atrocities, demands unfettered humanitarian